Welcome in to the New Orleans Saints podcast, hosted by Erin Summers and John DeShazier. You'll hear from players, coaches, broadcasters, and writers who cover the team on a daily basis. The New Orleans Saints podcast starts right now. Here's your hosts, Erin Summers and John DeShazier.
Welcome into the New Orleans Saints podcast. I'm Erin Summers. The Saints kicked off practice on Wednesday ahead of their game this Sunday against the Lions. They'll have 3 straight practices, walkthrough on Saturday, and then finally we are back in the Superdome for the next 3 weeks. Both teams, the Saints and the Lions, are coming off tough losses from last weekend, and they're looking to get right in this one. Head coach Dennis Allen said Monday it's about fixing some of the things that cost them against the Falcons, like their run gap integrity and the penalties, especially in the red zone. To help us break down what's been going on with the Saints and look ahead to that game Sunday against the Lions, John DeShazier and I sat down with Daryl Moose Johnston, longtime NFL player for the Cowboys, 3-time Super Bowl champ, president of the USFL, and NFL on Fox analyst. Moose had our game last weekend in Atlanta and will be here this weekend on Fox's broadcast at 12 o'clock Central from the Superdome. Daryl, thank you so much for joining us on the New Orleans Saints podcast. You are so lucky because you've gotten the Saints 2 weeks in a row, but this week you get to come to New Orleans. How are you doing? How excited are you to be able to be here and cover a game in the Superdome?
No, I'm excited. It's been a while since we've been in New Orleans. For me, it was one of the hardest places to play. We played in the Sugar Bowl when I was in college. And that's a split, and it was still incredibly loud. I remember going to a Saints game when we were down there, and then having had the opportunity to play there as a professional with the Dallas Cowboys. It's one of the better home field advantages when you talk about crowd noise and crowd participation, and really the knowledge of the fan, knowing when to be loud and when not to be loud. It's one of the more challenging ones around the NFL.
We're hoping that there are a lot of things to cheer for those fans on this upcoming Sunday, but there's been a lot of inconsistencies with the team. They've talked about needing to play complementary football, especially better in situational areas, especially the red zone, which I know you saw last week. You, a former player, how difficult is that to get everybody on the same page playing that complementary football?
Yeah, the situational component, it's hard even when you've been together for a while. So I think a lot of people have to understand, this organization was on cruise control for a long time with Sean Payton and Drew Brees. And now there's a little bit of transition with Pete Carmichael coming down and doing the play calling for the last couple of seasons. And then Derek Carr coming in this year. And you're getting Derek Carr comfortable with the offense that has been run by the Saints and what Coach Carmichael wants to use. And then he's asking Derek Carr, what are some of the things that you did well in Vegas? Watch the film, pull those out, try to mesh those together. So you've got a quarterback getting used to a new system, and then you've got players around him that support him getting comfortable with some of the things that he liked from his time with the Raiders. So there's going to be a process that you go through. And I think the one that always takes the longest are the situational components, the red zone, third down. 2 minutes usually okay because it's a style of play today, and it's just getting the communication through. But that's probably one of the big challenges right now is they're not connecting right now. They're building that trust, and you can see it grow. From watching the games, getting ready for last week's game against the Falcons, and going back and watching the progression of the offense. You can see the growth. It's just to the point you said. It's inconsistent right now.
Who do you think that falls on the offensive side in order to get back on track? Because right now they're down a couple wide receivers as well coming into this next game. What areas have you seen that they can kind of focus on to get that growth and improvement?
They've got a veteran offensive line, and for me, everything starts up front. So, I think that's the group that really has to play at a high level, make Derek Carr comfortable in the pocket, allow Alvin Kamara in the run game, to get down the field, get to that second level. There's a ton of really good pieces in place on the offensive side of the ball. Give the opportunity for the wide receivers if you are down and you don't have Rashid Shaheed. Obviously Michael Thomas is out. What is the status going to be there? coming in with Chris Olave. So if the younger guys have to step up, you don't want to have to rely on them and let them be supplemental players at that time and not make them feel like they have to carry the entire offense on the outside. So for me, it's going to be, how does that offensive line step up this week? Because you can see it. There were times last week, on the edge. I'm a big Alvin Kamara fan. I'm looking forward to talk to him this week in preparation for the game. I just think he's very underrated as a between the tackle runner. He's so good and so dynamic in space that we get focused on that as being his role, but he's the complete running back for the Saints. And I think a lot of people have been trying to find a running back similar to him, and it's very challenging. And then you add Jamal Williams to that mix, and it's pretty impressive. And if that offensive line can do their job, I think that allows the wide receivers in this next man up mentality to just kind of ease their way into the game plan and build their confidence.
Moose, having seen the Saints, what do you see from them run defense? And I mean, in the NFL, if you can't stop the run, it's going to be difficult to stop anything for the opposing offense.
Yeah, I'm going to go right back to where I was on the opposite side of the ball, the defensive line, and losing Coach Nielsen, who'd been there and been a guy for a long time that kind of developed those defensive linemen. We've watched that rotation for several years now. I mean, you had your frontline guys, and they were very good, but it was always the ability to roll guys through. And you lose Trey Hendrickson, and now you've got Carl Granderson on the outside, but you got hit a little bit hard last year, in that area, and you lost some of your depth. Shai Tuttle is moved on, and you're trying to fill those voids. And what happens is that rotation. I think that's the big area that I see, when I've done Saints games in the past, that quarterback always seemed to be under duress, and you don't see it as much when you're watching the film. And that puts a lot of stress on the back end, and the back end is held up well. It's one of the strengths of the defensive side of the ball. But as we talk about complementary football and an offensive and defensive marriage, it's the rush and the coverage on the defensive side that has to marry. And I see that more being the strength on the back end, holding down and being able to lock in on coverage and kind of plaster guys, because the quarterback has got plenty of time to sit in the pocket. The ball's not coming out fast enough, which is what we saw in years past with the Saints.
How does one, I guess, assuage the vitriol from a fan base when a franchise is kind of going through a transitionary period, and you want it to be well, but there's going to have to be a little bit of patience exercise, I guess.
Yeah, fans are going to be fans. It's important for them to kind of look at it from a 30,000 foot perspective and kind of understand why the challenges are there. I just think that sometimes there's a lot of communication, a lot of chatter coming into a season. And I think both for New Orleans and Atlanta, I think that there was a lot of positive expectations coming into this season for both teams. That becomes troublesome. And then you start to look at things, and it really ends up being, well, this week it was this, one week it was this problem. And that just shows you that's the process you're going through. It's the detail. You're trying to get the big things in place and good at the big things. And then you kind of funnel everything down and you start to hit the details. That takes a long time. I mean, Kansas City didn't burst right onto the scene when Patrick Mahomes, came to them. There was a short period of time, but there's still that adjustment. And I think we see that around the league. Joe Burrow got there, and that the first little bit of that transitional part there was the same thing. So even the teams with these really, really good quarterbacks, those top tier quarterbacks, there's also a period where they go through transition with everybody getting to understand, what the strengths are of the player, the quarterback himself, understanding, what the receivers do best, how the offensive line blocks. There's a lot of things, subtle things that you're learning every single day at practice, every single week when you play a game, that helps you build that kind of, knowledge of how you're going to perform on game day.
Saints are 5-6. Obviously, I'm tied for first in the NFC South, even though actually a game behind the Falcons because of the head-to-head. But is there a path for the team? Because it doesn't seem like it's going. Obviously, it's not going to take an 11-win team to win this division.
No, I think there's a path for both of them. There's people that even think that Tampa Bay could get back into the mix if they can get their ship righted. So. Last weekend was not the end of the season for the New Orleans Saints. They've got Atlanta one more time, and then it becomes a split. So now you're into tiebreakers if they can just match pace with them. So, It's just getting everything turned around. I know that last week was a disappointing performance. You have those same issues that continue to pop up, which is very, very frustrating, not only for the fan base, but for the players as well. When you continue to struggle in the red zone, I don't think people know how hard and how much energy you're putting into getting that resolved. And it's very frustrating for us when it doesn't. We were a team, even in our heyday, we were awful in the third quarter. I mean, and we talked about it and we focused on it. And it seems sometimes the more light you shine on it, the worse it gets. So, all of a sudden you just have that breakthrough and all of a sudden that thing kind of goes away. So they just need to come out, keep grinding at it. They're going to break through in the red zone one of these days. And then everything's going to kind of just get into a rhythm. And you have to take your lumps from time to time. It's kind of like what your competition is saying this week, from Dan Campbell. Every team hits adversity at some point during the course of the season. It's going to come. The biggest thing is, how do you respond to it? And they're in the middle of it right now in Detroit. And, you have to embrace that. Some people get frustrated with it, but, Dan Campbell's approach is we're going to embrace this. This is great. This is December football. We're almost there. We're getting close to the playoffs. We've got to find out if we deserve to be in that hunt. And I think New Orleans is in that same position. It's been challenging. You've bumped into adversity. How are you going to respond? Because if you win the South, you're in the playoffs, and anything can happen once you get into the playoffs. We've seen a number of teams get hot at the end of a season after having kind of a struggling start or middle part of the season, and they get on that roll and they have some noise that they make in the playoffs.
Yeah, I've got to take a left turn here because I've got to ask. Okay, economics degree from Syracuse, correct?
Correct.
What in the world are you doing in the football booth?
I love this game. It was the major that I had, at Syracuse. I started off with electrical engineering. That was a little bit of a reach. This is back when we didn't have the 20-hour limit on work weeks in college. So, but that was my opportunity, to get to Syracuse and play at a Division I level. I was a good student in high school. Probably one of the reasons that I was afforded the opportunity to go to Syracuse. So for me, it was the balance of graduating and also playing football. Got off to a pretty tough start in the electrical engineering area and had to dig myself out of a pretty good hole after 3 semesters. So, I learned a lot playing the game of football from our head coach, Dick McPherson, about life, probably more than I learned about football. I mean, I used his adages all the time. And when I get into tough spots, I kind of fall back on things that we were told and taught in college. But for me, it's just love of the game. I don't know what it is about this game. It gets into your blood, and it's hard to get it out. And now I'm in a position where I feel like I need to pay back to the game, and celebrate everything that it's provided for me. So, I mean, I love it. I've always felt like I need to be an ambassador, for other kids to try and create an opportunity. The stuff we do in the USFL in the spring, that's really what that focus is for me, is changing the trajectory of a young man's life by giving him an opportunity, not to get back to the NFL, because a lot of these guys have been there, but to get there and stay. Can you stay for 2 years? Can you stay for 3 years? So we work on teaching them how to be a professional, everything that we've learned over the course of our career as football players, to help change his life from a financial standpoint.
You're in a very unique position as the president of the USFL and broadcasting the NFL games. Why was that something that you got into? Even you were the vice president, but you kind of mentioned the ability to help other players, give them a new opportunity, but you're doing a lot.
Yeah. It's, again, it's a labor of love. I don't consider it work. I know there's a lot of people that would love to do what I get an opportunity to do. I mean, this weekend I get to sit down and talk to Dan Campbell and, players on the Detroit Lions, like to visit with Dennis Allen again and talk to some guys from the Saints and kind of pick their brain. And, everybody would love to do that. So, and then that afforded the opportunity, because in the beginning, Fox was the partner with the USFL. So they're kind of the overseers of the league. So the connection there and staying within the family of Fox, it was really kind of a natural fit. And I'd been a part of the Alliance American Football in 2018, the first iteration of the XFL in 2020. So I'd had experience with what happened with those two leagues. Why did those two leagues not survive? So, not only being a part of trying to build something, but also understanding where the pitfalls may lie. So, It's been great. I've really enjoyed it. We just had one of our players sign yesterday with the Atlanta Falcons. So we've got 25 guys that have signed to an NFL practice squad or an active roster this year, which is one more than we had last year. So we continue from year to year to create more opportunities for our guys to get back to the NFL and see if they can stay this time.
That's got to be really fun for you to watch and see some of those players make that step back into the NFL. One player that I'm sure you've come across on both sides is our defensive end here, Cam Jordan, as he's called some of those USFL games in the off season. He's on his 13th season. You played 12, same place. How unique is what he's been able to do, what you did, just playing for one franchise, kind of giving it your all and playing for such a long time?
Yeah, I think for me, it was interesting because the first half of my career was the old style of business. And then the second half of my career is when free agency came in. So, only half of my career. And then the backside of that is when teams are going to come in and kind of try to convince you to come and play for them. But for Cam to be able to stay in one spot for 13 years, as dominant as a player as he's been, shows the value that he's created within the Saints organization. And it's not just his production on the field. It's his leadership. It's who he is as a man. There's a lot of things that go into it when an organization commits to you for your entire career in today's era. That goes beyond your productivity on the field. It's an ambassador in the community. It's a face that everybody can relate to as New Orleans Saints fans. And that's who Cam Jordan is. We definitely had an opportunity to visit with him, especially season one, when we were really on location doing the games and got to visit with him and talk with him. And, one of the things I still stayed in touch with were the production meetings, with the broadcast groups and our coaches and our players. So, always got an opportunity, to visit with him every chance I had. I took advantage of that. And he's been great, on that side, and just a phenomenal NFL career. And when we talked about that D-line, that's one of the big things. They've always had Cam Jordan, and you can always just look to your left and see number 94 out there and how hard he plays and how much it means to him. So, not only his skill set and what he can teach you rushing the passer, but what it takes to be a pro every single day. And that's the biggest thing. That's what we find out about our guys in the USFL that didn't get a chance to stay in the NFL, is they don't understand how competitive it is and how good you have to be every single day. You have eyes on you from the moment you walk in to the facility in the morning until the moment you walk out in the afternoon. So everybody's watching, everybody's trying to see who you are as not only a football player, but as a man.
You've got to give us a grade on Cam broadcasting.
I know. I was going to say, I don't think he minds all the eyes on him, but yeah, how is he as a broadcaster?
Yeah, because Cam's thing is, no defensive lineman has ever not been held.
Yeah, I'm the complete opposite. No offensive player has ever held. And I'll fight tooth and nail. There was one last week in our game, and to me it was kind of just that, kind of a stiff arm. And I think sometimes the officials see a guy go to the ground and they haven't seen the whole play. What happened there? Why is that guy on the ground? And they just, he had to be held. He had to be pulled down. So I'm the exact opposite of Cam. I've never seen a hold. I've never seen a hold out there. So, but it's fun. I think the biggest thing is you make your strides from year to year more than you do week to week. That's when you get that quantum leap in understanding. It's just like the game. Everything starts to slow down for us. And you start to get into your comfort zone. You start to create your own style. What is your uniqueness? And the most important thing is you have to be likable. There's some people that like my broadcast because I'm a Dallas Cowboy. There's some people that won't even listen to me because I'm a Dallas Cowboy. If I'm doing a Philadelphia game, they're waiting for me to be critical of Philadelphia, and that's all they're going to hear. So that's one of the tougher parts is being true to yourself and just going out and Cam knows what good football looks like, and just trying to teach the viewer the how and the why really quickly during the course of those plays and the breaks in between, and being likable and just, everybody knows, from his personality, how likable he is. So he's got a big head start, into this industry just because of that. And then his time, his knowledge, just when people know who you are and know what you accomplished in your career and they give you that respect, they're waiting to hear the information that you're going to provide because they want to walk away from a broadcast and feel like they've learned something. They want to go to the water cooler on Monday and be able to make a comment about the game and have them feel smart because they're kind of inside. And it was not something that was kind of cliche. It was kind of that one or two levels below that was very smart and savvy. So those are the things that we hope to share with the listener during the course of the game.
I'm going to bring it back to this upcoming game real quick. Playing the Detroit Lions, you mentioned both teams looking to get right after tough losses last week. What do the Saints need to focus on that maybe the Lions do well, or is it really just focusing on the Saints and doing everything that they can to the best of their ability?
Yeah, I think the focus always has to be on yourself. Not even, you're going through a little bit of a tough stretch and everybody say, hey, it's all about us now. No, it's always all about us. Even when you're on a roll and you're playing really well, you still want it to be about us. You want to make the other team beat you. You never want to lose. And that's, one of the things we try to tell people is there's a big difference between getting beat and losing. When you lose, it's because there were things within your control that you helped contribute to you not winning and having success that day. Make the other team beat you, play a clean game. That's going to be the biggest thing here that we're going to be watching. I mean, New Orleans is good at taking the ball away. Detroit has really struggled the last couple of games. Can they continue that with Jared Goff? Desmond Ridder had a game where he threw 3 picks and then fumbled the 3 times the following game, and he was on the bench. Jared Goff has done the same thing. He's had 3 interceptions and 3 fumbles. So he's in a rut right now with something that kind of plagued him early in his career that hasn't been an issue since he's gotten to Detroit. So you wonder where he is mentally, with the turnover thing. So I think that's going to probably be the biggest indicator of who's going to win this game, who wins the turnover battle. Can New Orleans take the ball away? The other one for me is going to be down in the trenches again. Dan Campbell was not happy with how his offensive line played against Green Bay. I mean, he's going to challenge them. It's considered one of the better offensive lines in the NFL. And we talked about the Saints defensive line, trying to get back to the level that we're used to seeing them at, and maybe not being there where we've saw them, 2-3 years ago. That'll be a huge part of that. And then can the Saints offensive line control the defensive line of Detroit, which has happened quite a bit here over the last couple of weeks. They have not been getting to that quarterback. They haven't had somebody step up opposite Aiden Hutchinson to kind of create that other person that you have to worry about. When you can just focus on Aiden, that makes the offense's job a little bit easier. Aleem McNeil inside is a good player. Can he cause some issues, inside? So for me, it's going to be really about the takeaways and the turnovers, and then really who wins the battles on the offensive and defensive line during the course of the game, because they've both got great skill players, in the backfield, outside, that they can get the football to. But do you have the time to stand in the pocket and throw that? Do you have running lanes for your running backs to go through?
Daryl, in your pregame work, how much of a safe space is created for you by the fact that most of these players saw you play, they know you, and how truthful they are with you in the lead up to the game?
That's one of the things that you kind of earn. You earn the opportunity for them to share, whether it's players or coaches. You have to build that trust. And we've had a number of people, during the process of the interviews say, hey, this is not for TV. And we know they're going back and they're watching that because a lot of times it was something that was really good. Hey, can I say this off the record? We never repeat it, but we can take that information and then we can look into other areas and find some things. It sheds a little bit of light on things for us and helps us understand a little bit more. So we really want to create the relationship where the player or the coach can say whatever he wants. And if he wants to retract that or ask us not to share that, we're absolutely fine with that. But have them feel comfortable that they can really kind of get beyond the cliches. There's nothing more frustrating than to sit down and get a lot of just cliches about, the things that everybody knows about football. And nobody does that until you've earned that opportunity. You've earned that respect for them to take you to a different level with the information that they're going to share with you. So that's over time. I've played so long ago that a lot of these guys, they're not real familiar with me. They kind of know me as a Fox broadcaster. It's been 23 years since I played football. So for me, it's kind of that uphill battle. I'm getting to that point in my career as a broadcaster where the guys aren't going to remember me anymore. And, you hope they go back and do some research. The USFL guys, have done that. I've kind of, talked to them about certain things, and then they'll come up a couple days later and go, "Hey, I Googled you." He goes, you were a good player when you played. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. So the biggest thing for us is earning that respect, though. So the guys feel comfortable, being able to share the information, which helps us. And then we always say, we're like, hey, if you're a fantastic interview, if you get into a little bit of trouble out there, we can always find some reasons why it wasn't all your fault.
Yeah. You can be like, hey, that guy, Emmitt Smith, I'm the reason why he was so successful. I blocked for him every single Super Bowl we won.
Yeah, that all-time leading rusher guy, he was.
Yeah, that was me. Thanks, guys.
That was my that was my teammate. That was my running mate.
With the USFL, do you have any new rules that you're going to be implementing? Because the kickoff getting moved up was a huge success.
Yeah. We kind of last season followed the suit. They put their third quarterback rule in after the NFC Championship game as well. We did one as well. We didn't want to get into a situation where, we didn't have a quarterback. We can't go Wildcat. We don't have a Christian McCaffrey in our league. It's going to be hard. We've got a lot of guys that have a quarterback background and they're an emergency quarterback, but we really wanted to, for us, it was twofold. Number one, it guaranteed we'd have a quarterback, in the lineup the entire game, but it also forced our teams to bring a third quarterback into the football family and develop him. So instead of having 16 quarterbacks that we were developing, we had 24 last year, which we think is a big plus. There's a few things that we're talking about this year. Nothing real big like we did last year when we moved the kickoff back to the 20. Let me go off the top of my head. I think probably the biggest thing we'll do this year is if you commit a foul and there's not enough yardage to come off of to enforce it fully, we will take you down to the 2-yard line. So if there's a holding penalty on the 7, we're not going to take you to the 3.5. We're going to take you all the way to the 2. So we're going to enforce as much yardage as we can and put you kind of back down where you would be, as an offense going in. And that's both ways, so we just feel if it's a penalty, then let's enforce it as much we can and make it challenging. It's always kind of a give and take because you want points and you want excitement in the game. And we're also battling, length of the game. But we also, want to make sure that we're having an opportunity to put, a new spin on some things, and hopefully the NFL likes some of the stuff that we're doing. So it'll be fun. It'll be interesting to see what they do. We did an interesting thing with our punts a few years ago. I think right at the start we had it for season 1. Is Mike Pereira. It's one of the things that he always wanted, because it's very frustrating when the guys go out of bounds and they don't get back in time, and then you get a penalty. So because we're so much about pace of play and getting inside that 3-hour window, anything that we can implement that increases the pace of play, we want to do. So putting them on the outside, I got to get this one right, on the inside edge of the outside of the number, that's where our gunners have to line up. They can't go in towards the sideline. That way we prevent the funneling out of bounds and we take that penalty out. So you take that penalty enforcement out. Now we had to be careful if they went inside, that they didn't get funneled into all those guys coming down to cover the punt from a player health situation. So we monitored that the first 2 years, and that's actually something I think the NFL is considering taking up.
Very interesting. Well, we'll have to make sure we follow along this upcoming summer when the season starts again.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. We appreciate it, all the insight, and we look forward to having you here in New Orleans soon.
I'm looking forward to it too. Good luck to the Saints this weekend.
Appreciate Moose joining us. Looking forward to seeing what the future holds for the USFL and, of course, our team. We'll be back with another podcast Friday as we bring in a special guest, Pro Bowl Hall of Fame semifinalist for the 2024 class, our very own Jari Evans.
Thanks for listening to the New Orleans Saints podcast. Join us 3 times per week on NewOrleansSaints.com, the Saints mobile app, or you can download the podcast on iTunes. We'll see you next time, right here on the New Orleans Saints podcast.